Hi everyone, welcome to IGDA DC and our panel on game jams. It's a pretty timely panel because Global Game Jam is coming up this weekend, so I hope all of you are going to be participating in that, and if you don't know about Global Game Jam, we will tell you more about it and how to get involved on this panel. So my name is Reuben, I'm going to be the moderator, and I'm going to hand it off to panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Micha. I've done some game jams. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know not sure what to say here.
I'm Justin Park. I run a company called Intergalactic Education. We make STEM software for high school, middle school kids, and elementary school kids now. We're starting with the 5th grade class later this week. I've done a number of global game jams, and so I guess I can talk a little bit about that.
My name is Guchhait. I am the CEO of an indie game studio called Boba Studios. We actually just put out a new free build of our game last week. If you want to check it out, it's called Squirrely Rabbit. I'm also participating in a few game jams and a hackathon.
I'm Callen. I have also done some global game jams. I do game development for my day job and as a hobby in the night, so I do a lot of prototyping and stuff, and I love game jams.
So between the 5 of us, how many game jams have you participated in?
Between the 5 of us, we have somewhere around 65 to 70 game jams combined.
So between the 4 of us that aren't Micha, we almost equal one Micha.
I got a problem with game jams.
This is actually an intervention.
So we're going to start out with a probably a simple question. What is the best reason or your favorite reason to participate in a game jam? Start with Micha.
Sure. My favorite reason for doing a game jam is most of the jams that I do are only a weekend. They're a set amount of time, right? So the best thing about it is you start working on it, and at the end of the time period, at the end of the weekend, you just walk away. It's not like a project that continues to sit, like, are you going to work on me or not? It's done. You can come back to it if you want, but it's just done. That's great. It's super awesome. So it's a good way to experiment, and if you fail, you fail. You lost the weekend. Big deal. So that's my thoughts. Anybody else?
We don't have to go in order, but if you'd like to say something, feel free to jump in.
I like game jams because I typically recruit from them. You can find really good developers and engineers and artists. Game jams are kind of where the rubber meets the road. You only have 24, 48 hours to build something. And so if someone's not pulling their weight, you recognize it very quickly.
My answer is pretty similar to Micah's. I think, like, especially after working on like a lot of long-term projects, doing a game jam where you're like touching on something for a very short amount of time is really inspiring. You get to try out new things.
I really like, especially with Global Game Jam, how they have the idea creation phase of like, everyone sort of throws ideas literally up on the wall at most of the sites I go to, and then people sort of congregate around the ones they like, and I just find that really fascinating to see what people want to work on that year and what ideas people are thinking about.
I guess that's something I would add is if you want to learn a new skill or you want to get involved in game development, game jams can be a really good way to get your feet wet and take on a role that you might not have in your day job. Like I like to work on sound a lot at game jams, whereas in my day job I'm a designer and programmer, so it can be a good thing about it as well. I guess just take a step back. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't know what a game jam is? Why don't we start out by giving a quick definition of a game jam?
Sure. A game jam is a little like a hackathon, if you know what a hackathon is. And if not, we'll back up another step. It's basically, in most game jams, you have a set time period. You don't start work on anything of it before that time period starts, it's basically from scratch. In most game jams, you have a theme that is announced at the beginning of it. So for Global Game Jam, for instance, this weekend at 5:30, they're going to announce the theme, and then you start working on it for roughly 48 hours. When the 48 hours are up, you're done. You typically work with a team. It's a good chance to try some new skills.
Sometimes there's prizes.
Yes.
Those are fun ones because people are motivated more, usually. Yeah.
Yeah, pros and cons of prizes. I mean, prizes leads to competition, but lack of prizes means a lot of times the teams will collaborate with each other, especially if they're having difficulties. I've seen Unity teams like fight each other's bugs for them, which is super awesome, especially global game jam.
So when you go into a game jam like Global Game Jam, what do you expect to get out of it, personally?
I mean, for me, it sort of changes year to year. I think my first couple were to sort of meet new people and see what kind of skills they bring to the table. Later on, it became more focused on like, well, I really don't have any time right now to learn how to do this one specific thing, but that's what I'm going to try and do during this game jam.
Similarly to Callen, with my first one, I was interested in like meeting new people and seeing like what skills I could work on. And I think more recently, I like game jams. I like going into them with the idea that I just like can test out something new and try making like another game really fast and let it go.
Anyone else? I'm going to rephrase this next one. Are there any prerequisites to participating in a game jam? Is there anything that you need to do beforehand in order to have a successful game jam? Do you need to have a plan? Do you need to have a team? What do you need before?
Usually helps if you have a computer, laptop. It doesn't have to be a laptop. I've seen people lug like huge workstations in with like 3 monitors or the VR headsets or whatever. But yeah, usually computer, unless you're designing like a paper game or a card game or something, which you can do. A lot of the game jams I go to have to do with building something that's digital.
So to paraphrase, bring the tools you need.
Bring the tools you need, and a good attitude.
Yeah.
Do you need to have any skills?
You can go there to find skills. Usually, it's best to try and go there and try and find the people that have the skills that you don't have, and then you can learn from them. My first couple game jams, that was like the best way of learning Unity, is to just go and work with people that have been using Unity for years and years.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know. Yeah. I'll just go with that.
So taking a step back to what you said first, you talked about tools. Do the 4 of you have any favorite tools to use during game jams, especially free tools?
Unity's free. I keep tooting that horn, and I'm sure they're a sponsor of the Global Game Jam again this year. Last year they were like a platinum sponsor or something. Unity makes it pretty easy to quickly prototype stuff. They've got their own physics engine. They've got all of these tools and things that you can use to help you build something that's playable quickly. Somebody else can talk about audio tools or...
Not to mention the asset store with Unity too.
Yeah,
And
the
just
asset store.
having a good source for assets is great, if you're trying to build something where you don't feasibly have the time to have an artist draw or model every single thing you need in the game. So lots of good free asset resources. I mean, Unity's got a store, Unreal has a store. There's a few good, I don't remember them anymore because I'm so dependent on Unity, but there's some good 2D free asset websites out there.
Game Maker is a popular one that people use as an alternative to Unity. RPG Maker. There's like good lists out there of a lot of the free tools that are available.
So outside of engines, what are your favorite tools?
Whiteboard.
Slack. Slack is
Trello.
really important.
Okay. Along the lines of Slack. I like Trello.
For people who don't know, Slack is like Facebook, but for a small group of people. So you can send instant messages, you can post graphics, you can post code. It's a really simple user interface, easy to administer, and very easy to set up.
If you don't know what Trello is kind of it's like a Kanban board. It's like basically a set of index. If you just were to like stick post-it notes on your wall and kind of order them in like, here's a list of to-dos, here's a list of I've done, here's a list of for Micha to do kind of things.
Yes.
Yeah, to test, that kind of stuff. It's very much like that. You can use it for a bunch of different things, but that's its main purpose for a game jam. So it kind of replaces the post-it note system that a lot of people use. I still like post-it notes. It's really fun taking them off the wall and throwing them in the box. It's great. Crumple them up. So,
Any art or audio tools, visual art or audio tools that you like and particular?
When I don't have a musician on my team, there's a website called abundantmusic.com. It's basically a procedural music generator. It spits out a MIDI file. You can use it to, you can adjust whether it's major or minor, how many beats in the measure. You can continually tweak the random number generator so you get different instruments or different sounds. It's great. We typically just run through 3 or 4 songs and figure out which ones we like, and then we maybe go into an editing program and just strip out the weird bridge that I might throw in there or something like that. But it's pretty good if you want to have a musician on your team.
I'll always throw in a plug for a program whose name I never get right. BFXR.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but then I use the version made by the Super Flash Bros.
Yeah,
called
Chiptune.
AS3 SFXR. No, I used the old one.
Oh, your
because
old
I
one.
couldn't figure out Chiptune.
Chiptune's great. It's just
I've
unfinished.
looked at it a few times. I'm like, I don't know what any of this do. I know I can just hit the randomize button on the other and get explosion sounds.
Yeah.
So basically, it simulates old consoles sound generators, and it has presets to do like coin sounds and explosion sounds and just lots of little loops and loops that are really helpful when you just want some audio feedback.
Then you can mix in a catapult.
Yes.
Another one that I like to mention is Figure, which is free on iOS, and you can export 90-second clips of audio. It's really good for electronic sort of music and that feeling.
Graphics, probably Blender. You won't learn Blender in a weekend, but Blender's free. It's like 3D Max, but it's open source, so you can download it for free. There's GIMP, which is like a free version of Adobe Photoshop, and yeah, those are the best ones. They're the most common ones. I like Microsoft Paint as well.
So let's move on to games. Do you have a favorite type of game to make during a game jam, or do you have a favorite game that you have worked on during a game jam? Either or, and why?
As far as types of games, I find since the time constraints are kind of limited, it's good to make something that has a really short kind of gameplay loop to it. So I tend to end up with like 80s and 90s, early 90s style arcade game type gameplay. You know, something that you could play in like 2 minutes and then kind of repeats maybe, or game over, you know, that kind of thing. So most of my game jam games end up being very much like that. I don't know about the rest of you.
Usually it's best to focus on a single mechanic and then just really try to make that one mechanic as good as you can. I like to make side scrollers, or at least my favorite game was to make a side scroller. We made this Superfly game last year that had really awesome sound effects that Reuben made. And we were actually able to go back. I was able to import the game into my company's repository, and we reskinned everything, and yeah, we're actually able to use the code base from that game jam, which was pretty useful.
My team actually, like, I usually go in with a group of people, and one of the things that we lean towards is always like having a game that like revolves around some sort of story or narrative aspects to it. It doesn't always like lend itself like quite to game jams, but like even in the smallest of ways, we've done that with all of our games. So I think that's something that we've already discussed about working with Global Game Jam this year too. And yeah.
Why does that work well for you?
I think it works well for me because that's just like a lot of the way that I think.
In story.
Yeah. And I just like kind of see everything as a story. So when it comes to like, you know, making the game and figuring out why the mechanic works as it does, it's just like that, to me, that just naturally follows.
Any other good genres of games to make?
VR.
Any bad genres of games to make?
MMOs?
What wouldn't you choose?
My first global game jam, we set out to make a networked 2-player point-and-click adventure where each player saw a slightly different view of the world, and they had to use voice chat to communicate with each other. Suffice to say, we didn't quite get it done in 48 hours. I would say that would be maybe a genre that requires world building and like lots of, you know, gameplay to really make it sort of sell the point is not going to be a good thing to do.
That being said, like a game jam can be a jumping off point for you, so I wouldn't say like don't do any specific genre. if that's like something you want to try, like go for it and you can pick it up.
Do you have other recommendations for how to be successful at a game jam?
Don't be afraid to fail, because you're going to at some point. I mean, I've done a bajillion jams, and I would say only half of them are any good. So I can show you some of the bad
Certainly
ones.
less
if you
than
want.
half of mine are any good. So, Micah has set a high bar with half.
If nobody likes your idea, don't cry. Everyone normally gets to put all their ideas up, and like, I don't know if I've ever had an idea that was like, everybody was like, that's a great idea. They come over and like join your team. I think I inevitably almost always end up joining another person's team. Yeah, maybe this is my year. Let's see.
Yeah, I think 4 out of 5 of the ones I've done, I ended up on someone else's idea, and I think that's the advice. Just be open to, let the currents take you wherever they may.
Yeah.
Like one year we were working on a game, a 2-player game where you shared a keyboard, and I just happened to get a little adapter to connect keyboards to Android devices, and I was like, wait, I have a tablet and this. Let's go run around and have people test it, and that was a blast. And just kind of the way things worked out made it a really fun experience.
I would definitely agree with being adaptive, especially because like you only have a limited amount of time, and as you think of things, you figure out that you won't be able to complete everything that you've thought of, and just being willing to like let that go and keep going with what you have, and also to be well rested beforehand.
And during the jam, in my opinion, I think it's good to sleep during a game jam. I know a lot of people try to do the full 24 or 48 hours in one go. Don't do it. Don't do it. Get some sleep. It's good. Even if it's like going like 2 or 3 hours, just sleep
And eat.
and eat. Yes, eat decent food too. Don't just eat the same granola bar for 48 hours.
Be aware if your jam site is like offering food, and if it's not, like figure out your plan on how you're going to eat beforehand, and not like trying to figure that out in the cluster of like all of the people around that you're working with.
So, besides coming in with a team that you already know you like, how do you make sure you have a good team for a game jam? How do you choose people when you're at the site? How do you find an idea that's good while also making sure you have a good team?
I would say before even thinking about butting heads idealistically, make sure you're not butting heads logistically. Like, if you're on a team of 5 programmers and nothing else, you're probably gonna have a bad time at game jam, because it's really hard to mix code between multiple people. Like 2 people is good, 3 people's pushing it. Any more than 3 people coding, you're gonna have a bad time. You gotta deal with like source control or getting flash drives back to each other, and yeah, it's no fun.
Don't use flash drives.
Yeah.
Source control is way better.
I guess that's a good tool to touch on. Git is a very good tool to use during a game jam.
Yeah, unless you're on train jam.
How else do you make sure you have a good team?
Stuff
Is it luck?
I mean, some of it's luck. Trying to find a well-rounded team, someone who does graphics, someone who does coding, someone who can do sound, someone who can do design. Usually everyone can kind of take part in the design, but making sure that everyone has a vision that's the same is also pretty important. Figure out that one mechanic that you want to build, and make sure everyone is focused on doing that. Yeah.
Be open-minded. Don't be afraid to let things be cut away. Leave them on the cutting room floor, because it's gonna happen. Through scope or whatever. Sorry, Ashley.
Like don't be afraid to let somebody else do a job that you know that you can do. Like if you know that you're able to produce sound, but somebody else is doing that for this project, then that's what they're doing for this project, and like you focus on what you're doing. And that's not to say like you can't like critique each other or like talk about edits, but like make sure that you know that you're working on a team if you're working on a team.
So, let's say you didn't do that at a jam. What is the biggest mistake, or maybe you can phrase it constructively, what's the biggest learning opportunity you've ever had at a game jam? What was the problem and how did you address it, or how didn't you address it? How would you do it differently in the future?
My first global game jam, the guy who ran the site decided he was also going to be the one to form all the teams, and the whole entire site ended up being on one 20-person team. And it was like the worst ever. So I'm typically I kind of sort of do project management and coding and a little bit of everything else, and design as well. And I ended up being the story writer on that team because nobody else wanted to do it because everybody wanted to do the cool stuff. And it was like 20 people trying to all do the cool stuff, and that's not the way a team works. Everybody does like a chunk of it, and it's all cool together. Needless to say, that the game was pretty awful. Also network, by the way. It was a 2-player network game, and it didn't quite work out very well.
Don't do network games, game jams.
Yeah, so my lesson from that one is make sure you form not only a game of the right size, but a team of the right size. Forming a team of maybe 3 people is a good size. 3 to 5 is probably good. I've done teams of 1 before. A little lonely, but it's not bad.
Does anyone want to touch on scope more fully? How do you scope correctly, or what's a mistake you've made with scope?
Yeah, you're not going to get done with everything you wanted to do. Like, I've never been to a game jam where we got all of the features built. Usually you make a healthy list, prioritize the list, and then start from the top, and if you get halfway through, then you did a pretty good job.
Good luck if you get even that far.
Yeah, I'd say really just start with the one thing that you have to have so that you can upload it to the Global Game Jam website and say, I did a thing. And try to get that done, in under 24 hours. And then you can just refine. And some of that's going to be, your best work, because you find, if we did this like that, all of a sudden we just did something no one even saw at the beginning when we had this design.
Any other mistakes that you'd like to talk about or admit?
Don't stare out the windows of the train too long. You never get your game done.
Or do, 'cause
Or
it's
do.
beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yeah.
You win either way.
We're talking about train jam. If you don't know what train jam is, it's about a 52-hour game jam on a train from Chicago to San Francisco right before GDC. It's pretty awesome, but the scenery is just super distracting. Like, you're gonna spend about half the time looking out the window, and the other half maybe getting your game done. Maybe. So, I recommend.
So on that note, what's all of your favorite game jam you've participated in, and why?
Yeah, train jam. The other thing about train jam is there's no internet on the train, so you kind of have to talk to people, and it's the size of an Amtrak train, so there's no going around people. You got to go next to people and talk to them. So it's great.
So why is it your favorite?
I guess there's no escape. I guess. Sort of. And I guess the other thing about train jam is there's people from all around the world on this train. There's like 300, 400 people on one train, and they all just mingle over the course of the whole entire weekend. And it's like people of big names, people of low names, people of all kinds of status and experience all on this train, and it's great. So, yeah.
I like the Galactic Space Jam. It's held in Orlando every year. I like it because I like space. I don't know if anybody knows me here. No, actually a lot of people here. And I'm kind of a space guy. So they also have prize money every year. Last 2 years we got prizes, and so that paid for my trip, which is pretty cool. And I actually have friends in Orlando now, which is also kind of nice.
Also, it's got Space Jam in the name.
And it's got Space Jam in the name.
Do
And
you
they
watch-
play that
do
song
you watch Space
every
Jam? Yeah.
single year when people are presenting their projects.
I really like Global Game Jam. I think one of the reasons that I like it so much is, like the name says, Global Game Jam, and just so many people are involved with it. If you're in any sort of circle where you talk to a lot of developers, even if you don't regularly work with them, if you come to IGDA or something, most people that you know are at least know about it, and a lot of people are participating in it. So it's really great to see that even if you don't see those people for that weekend and aren't at the jam site, that they might have made something too.
And I also love Global Game Jam. I guess I'll talk specifically about a year. This would have been 3 jams ago, where I was doing some of my first VR work on a Samsung Gear VR, and it's funny that I'll say this is one of my favorite experiences, but I was working on something with physics, and the physics screwed up and flung me across the room, and I had to rip off the headset, run to the bathroom, and vomit. And that was the first time I'd ever really gotten the whole VR sickness thing, and been like, okay, so you don't use physics in a VR game. And it was just cool to learn that, but then have to go back and keep working and be like, okay, how do I fix it? I don't know. It's weird that that's my favorite experience.
So, after you're done with the game jam, hopefully you haven't vomited. How do you keep up your energy and work on that project further, or can that project and work on something else? What do you do after the jam to make it continue to be a good experience for yourself?
First things first, sleep. Get some sleep, and that way you'll wake up refreshed. Whenever I do a game jam, I always get like super like energized for like the next week or so. You get like this like jam high, and it's kind of awesome. It kind of gives me the energy to go back into my main project and think of it in a different way, because I've been spending 48 hours or however long I've been doing it in just like a totally different mindset. So I come back to my main game, I'm like, oh, I can just do this thing. I should have done this the whole time. It's so obvious. So I keep up my energy by applying sort of like the energy that I got from the high into my main project. And then I sort of apply the project management that I need for my big project back to the jam if I'm ever going to come back to it. Because like during the jam, when you get done with it and as people start playing it, they're going to be like, hey, there's a bug in level 2. The guy always smashes his head against the wall. I'm like, this isn't a smashing game. What is this? And so you write this list of itty bitty bugs, and then you come back at it after a couple days and you're like, I could fix this, maybe I couldn't, whatever, who cares? And so, I don't know, it gives you like another perspective, because you just got this high of coming off the jam. I don't know, it's not a very good answer.
I don't think it's that bad of an answer. Usually you can take the lessons learned from your game jam back to whatever project you were working on before. I've been to a game jam where somebody made a really cool shader, and we use that shader, in other projects or future game jams. Just because you're going to one doesn't mean you're not going to go to the one next year. And so you end up collecting this repository of different techniques and resources and things that you can use in the future.
I would agree with that. As far as building a repository, you can even it might not be something that you're going to use in another game jam, but you can use that in jumping off on another longer project later too, and just having that as backup. And then you know that you're going to be done with the next project. You always have something an idea of a way that you can continue to move forward as a developer.
I would have said the same thing as them, but I felt something different. I like the end where you actually upload your project to the site, write a little description, throw some screenshots, and then actually looking at everyone else in your specific jam site or all over the world and seeing what everyone else is doing. I think that's real cool for me to be like, okay, looking back, what did I do? Okay, I did something pretty cool. What did everyone else do? Wow, they all did some really cool stuff too. Usually cooler. Be good to yourself.
You can put it on a resume too. If you want to work in the industry, you have to have a portfolio, and your Global Game Jam games can go in your portfolio.
Yeah, so it shows that you've completed something. Well, if that was a jam that you completed something in, it could be one of those ones where you don't complete something.
Is there anything else to add before you go to the last question? Are there any other favorite jams that you want to mention that we haven't talked about, or just interesting ones that you've participated in that you think deserve a mention?
Interesting ones. Every year in November, some of you have done this one, is the 0 Hour Game Jam, which if you haven't heard me talk about it before, you somehow have been living under a rock, because I talk about it all the time. 0 Hour Game Jam happens during the time change in November, and basically you start at 1 a.m. before the time change, and you work for 59 minutes, and then 1 minute, you stop working on your game, and then 1 minute later it goes back to 1 a.m. again, and then as far as the clock is concerned, you've spent 0 hours working on your game. And it's an incredibly weird challenge because it happens in 1 hour. Can you make a game in 1 hour?
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, yeah. And at least in my case, I know it's been too long because my source control tools all sorts of mess up if I try to go past the time change, because it doesn't understand that I'm working in the future, in the past now. So yeah, it's super fun. I recommend it. Or just try making a game in an hour, just as a challenge, or 3 hours. It's super weird. So, or designing a game in an hour.
Also, Mike, I'm surprised you haven't plugged LD that much yet, but I'm still not that familiar with it.
Okay, so LD is Ludum Dare, or Ludum Dare, whichever you decide to call it, Ludumdare. It's an international online game jam that happens 3 times a year. It's actually going to be 2 times a year now as of this past December. Has a very large number of participants. I want to say maybe there was 2,600 or 2,800 games submitted this past December, which is humongous. It happens on the weekend, goes from Friday till Sunday. If you're on the strict rules, it's Friday to Monday if you're on the relaxed rules. Yeah, it's great. A lot of great games that you've played, or at least heard of, have come out of Ludum. Same thing with Global Game Jam for that matter too. There's some games you've probably heard of. Can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe Keep Talking and No One Explodes. That might be a Global Game Jam game. Yeah, there's a lot of great games out there that come from LD. You can chat after this about it if you want to know more.
And if you're not talking to somebody on this panel, how do you find out about game jams? What are some good resources for finding them in your local area or online or any of those?
IndieGameJams.com has a rotating calendar. Also, I think it's jams.itch.io has a calendar of ones that are hosted on itch.io. Those are 2 great ways to find jams. Yeah, those 2 I can think of off the top of my head.
Any other ways that you find out?
I would say talk to developers, like IGDA, talk to Micha. You know, if you have any, like if you're in school, your professors, if if you're on any sort of sites that like host games, they often like you were saying with itch, forums, any like boards where people talk about games.
Yeah, and if you're thinking, should I do a game jam? The answer is yes. Just do one. See if you like it. If you don't like it, who cares? I mean, like you said, you lost 48 hours of your life. How many 48 hours do you have in your life? A very lot of them. A very large number of 48-hour chunks.
Doing game jams is also a great way to learn about game jams because people that do game jams do game jams.
Yes.
So.
Anything else you want to add? Any of you?
Well, a game jam that you can find is this weekend in Global Game Jam. I'm hosting a site in Roslyn, just near the Roslyn Metro. Kicks off at 5 o'clock, so be there at 4:30. Goes all weekend.
We're planning to do a Global Game Jam this weekend.
Cool.
There are still 15 spots at your site, right?
Yeah. Actually, it might be more than that because we bumped it up to 35.
Okay. We
have a cap of 35 now. So breakfast and dinner will be provided. Lunch is on your own for Saturday and Sunday. But yeah, snacks too. It's gonna be good.
And another thing that's coming up is Train Jam, which Micha talked about a little bit. If you're interested in going on Train Jam, I have a ticket that I am trying to sell. And it is in March, just before GDC. It's a great way to get to GDC if you're trying to go to the Game Developers Conference, which is also an amazing event that people should go to at least once in their life if they like game development. So talk to me about that if you're interested.
You don't have to go to GDC to do Train Jam.
That's true. But it is from Chicago to San Francisco, so you'll need to get to Chicago and back from San Francisco somehow. So with that, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
What skills or trades or other things that are involved in game making are usually lacking in most game jams? Like, is there always a shortage of like music or shortage of art or coders or things like that?
I'd say art and sound pretty reliably needed. Never a shortage of coders in any game jams I've been to.
Yeah, go ahead.
For me, it depends on where you are. If you're at like a tech college, you're not going to have any problems finding programmers. If you're at an art college, you're probably not going to have problems finding artists. So know your site. If you're at Bubble Up, I don't exactly know who's going to be there. So maybe know your site and try to build a skill that might be in demand there. Anybody have anything else to add?
Don't try to be just an idea person, because everybody thinks they have ideas, and kind of the point of the jam is to come up with new ideas, so don't be that person. Don't be just that person. Be ideas and coding, ideas and art, ideas and sound.
Or don't be ideas.
Or don't be ideas.
That's also fine.
Yes, yes.
Any other questions from anybody? Yeah.
I guess, because I'm still figuring all this stuff out. How does one sort out when they have like creative challenges? Is there like an international like luck the draw, rock paper scissors challenge, or
mean challenges between the team members?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you're butting heads and continually butting heads and can't find a point of agreement, then maybe you're not the right team. I don't have any good advice for that, really. I mean, you can always appeal to someone else that's not on your team, somebody who's not invested in the product in any sort of way. Like they don't have, it's not their ideas, so they can do it. But yeah, rock paper scissors, I guess, in a pinch.
Or take a vote.
Or take a vote. Yeah, sure.
Also, I've seen plenty of people move from a team where maybe there was too many people with one skill, or maybe there was a disagreement, and move to another team and help them out and have a great jam still.
Yeah, when is it too late to switch projects or switch teams in a jam?
The first physical jam that I did, I gave up 3 hours before the end of the jam and made a totally new game and won. So, I don't know.
So never.
Never, yeah. As long as you're still feeling creative and still feel like working, never.
Right. And if you're not having fun, you're probably not doing it right. So if you switch to something that makes you happier, that's a valuable experience.
Actually, this is something I suppose I like a lot about, but I'm curious about. Strategies for de-scoping. Like, you know, we're always talking about de-scoping the jam and making it fit the time allotted and the resources given to you, but how do you do it better?
Stop thinking about polish. Callen kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I mean, it's sort of like try to find the smallest possible piece that is fun, or at least entertaining. It doesn't have to be fun to be entertaining. It's two different things. Scary movies, not really fun, but they're entertaining, right? Scary games are the same way. Yeah, so try to find the smallest possible piece and then iterate on that. And if it feels good, then you can add pieces to it. So if your scope is just too much, try to hack it in half and say, okay, well, I'm jumping and running. Let me do just jumping and see how that works. And if you have time, then do the running. That kind of thing. I don't know if that answers your question well enough.
No, it does.
So you'd say take out features? That's the first thing you do?
Yep.
So, like, instead of running on command by the player, you could say auto run.
Sure, that'd be a good way to do it, yeah. That's a good solution. Any other ones? Other ideas? De-scoping?
Yeah, no, I'm in the position where I always try and like de-scope it all at the very beginning, kind of like the prioritized list Justin was talking about. So you don't get, 30 hours in, realize you're only 10% of the way done, and go, oh no, we have 15 half-finished features. Which ones should we finish? I mean, if you sort of do it, build this little kernel and then build a little bit more around it, build a little bit more around that, you're much less likely to end up in a point where you are scrambling to cut things out at the end, and you just won't build the things that you realize you didn't have time for.
I guess by extension, is it better to finish the game really early?
Yes.
And just,
In my opinion, yeah. Because you can always add more, but
Or do another game.
yeah.
Right. I think there's a diversifier this year that says make a second game in the time frame. Actually, there's a different diversifier that's make a second game inside your first game.
I've
So,
done that before.
yeah?
Yeah.
So,
So if you're doing a 48-hour jam, when would you expect or want to have your first playable prototype by?
Saturday afternoons usually like a
So
good
24 hours in.
yeah, 24 hours or less.
Yeah, 24 hours or less.
Friday at 1 a.m. or Saturday at 1 a.m.
Yeah, it's
You
not...
want the idea by then.
It doesn't have to be a full game, but to have some of your mechanics done before you go to sleep for the first night, and I just thought of all these things to add to that.
That's very ambitious. Usually, if you can just get the core idea on paper, that is it, and get the repo set up, then that's like what I usually try and finish on the first night. And then you pick up early on Saturday morning. By like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, if you got the first prototype going, then you're good. Then you'll probably finish whatever most of the stuff that you were hoping to have it be fun.
My experience, I aim for what Callen is saying, and I end up with what Justin is saying.
Is there any time that's too early to have a playable prototype?
Before the jam. You're supposed to build it there.
Any other questions? Yeah.
How often does it come to where you actually have like a great idea, you only get like 48 hours, but you want to expand with that particular game and maybe with that team?
You can keep doing it. I mean, Super Hot was created at a game jam, and now it's like one of the most successful VR games out there. So you can definitely keep working on it.
How often has it happened to you that you continue a game with the same team?
We didn't continue in the same game, but as I said, we kind of stripped off all of the skins and then reskinned the graphics, and then that mini game is actually a game within the educational platform that my company's built.
Does anyone have an experience with making a game for a game jam and then continuing it with the same team or anything like that?
Yeah, so numbers wise, for mine, since I have a higher quantity, not necessarily quality of jams of the rest of the people here, I'd say roughly a quarter of the games that we make with my team I want to continue on with, and we only really do that for about 5% of them. So it's just time, there's only so much time in the world. So
A lot of 48-hour chunks, but not many
yes,
game development length.
yeah, I mean real life comes at you. So.
All right, anything else? Okay, well, I guess we're going to wrap up there. Thank you all for listening, and feel free to hang out here, eat some food, drink some things till 8. And yeah, thank you for coming and listening.
Yeah.